All right, let's talk about something really interesting. We're going to break down an absolutely killer earnings report from a company called nVent. And what's so cool about them is they're not just riding these massive global trends, they're literally building the foundation that makes it all possible.
Look, it's no secret the world is just getting hungrier and hungrier for electricity. I mean, think about it. Our cars, our factories, every single data center, they're all screaming for more power. And this isn't some slow, gradual thing. We're talking about a complete rewiring of our global infrastructure. It's being supercharged by, digitalization, sustainability, and of course, the absolute explosion in AI.
So that raises a really big question, right? With all this new demand, who's actually building the backbone for all of this? Who's making the stuff that connects everything and protects it, making sure all that power gets where it needs to go safely and efficiently?
And that right there is where nVent comes in. We're going to dive into their latest earnings report because honestly, the numbers tell a fascinating story. It's a story about a company that isn't just catching this huge wave, they're actually helping to build it.
Okay, first things first. Let's get right to the headline numbers. And wow, they are frankly staggering. Get this, almost 42% growth in year-over-year revenue for Q4. Just let that number sink in for a second. Growth like that is absolutely eye-watering. It's our first huge clue that something really big is happening with this company.
And believe me, this wasn't some lucky one-time thing. The CEO, Beth Wozniak, put it perfectly. She said 2025 was a record year for everything: sales, earnings, cash flow. So you gotta ask, right? How in the world did they pull this off?
Well, this kind of success doesn't just happen by accident. Nope. It was the result of a very deliberate and, as we'll see, an incredibly successful strategic pivot.
This right here, this chart tells so much of the story. You see that big slice? That's infrastructure. It used to be a much smaller piece of the pie for them, but now it's almost half of their entire sales. And let's be clear, this isn't just a tiny tweak to the business model. This is a fundamentally different company than it was just a few years back.
And what's really wild is how fast this all happened. I mean, think about this. When nVent first became its own company, infrastructure was only 12% of its business. Fast forward to 2025, and boom, it's 45%. And they think that by 2026, it's going to be well over half of everything they sell. That's not just growth, that's a lightning-fast transformation. So how do you make a change that big, that fast? Well, you get really smart about what you own. They actively reshaped their whole portfolio. They sold off some of their older businesses, like their thermal management unit, and instead, they went out and bought companies that were right in the sweet spot of this growth, companies like EPG and Tractit. Those moves put them smack dab in the middle of the electrical infrastructure boom.
Okay, so we've established they made a huge pivot into infrastructure. But what's the rocket fuel here? What specifically is lighting the fire under all this growth? I have a feeling the answer, especially in 2025, is not going to surprise you.
Because, let's face it, the numbers we're seeing are just too big to be explained by the market is doing well. No, there's something else going on. There's a very specific and very powerful catalyst at play here. And that catalyst is, of course, the AI revolution. It's the insane, unprecedented build-out of data centers needed to power all this AI. And nVent? They've managed to position themselves as an absolutely critical supplier for this entire boom. And just look at these numbers. They're wild. Their sales to data centers alone jumped from $600 million to $1 billion. $1 billion in just 1 year. Orders are up 30%. And the backlog, that's all the work they've already booked but haven't even started on yet, that has tripled to $2.3 billion. This, my friends, is what hypergrowth looks like in the real world.
So a huge piece of this puzzle is a technology called liquid cooling.
Here's the deal. AI chips get crazy hot. So hot that the old way of cooling them with air just doesn't cut it anymore. And get this, less than 30% of data centers even use this new liquid cooling tech yet. So for a company like nVent, who specializes in this stuff, the runway for growth is just massive. All right, so the strategy is super clear. But let's look at a couple more numbers from the report that really prove that this whole plan is working, and not just in one area, but across the entire company.
Zooming out for a second, look at the full year. Total sales hit $3.9 billion. That big jump you see, That's not a coincidence. It's the direct result of their new focus. It shows that their big bet is paying off in a really, really big way. And it's not just about selling more stuff. They're also beating expectations, which is always a great sign. Their earnings per share, basically their profit per share, came in just a penny higher than what everyone was forecasting. Now that might sound small, but a beat is a beat. It shows they're not just growing, they're running the business incredibly well.
But here's what really impresses me. It's not just about explosive growth. It's about building a rock-solid financial foundation. They're generating a ton of free cash flow. That's the actual cash they have left after paying all the bills. And they're using it to do smart things, like paying down debt and giving money back to shareholders. So see, this isn't just a flashy growth story. It's the story of a really well-run, disciplined company.
So after a year like that, the million-dollar question is pretty obvious, right? Can they keep this momentum going? Well, let's take a look at what they're forecasting for the future. So looking ahead, they're predicting another year of really strong growth. But, and I like this, they're also keeping it real. They're pointing out some potential headwinds, things like inflation and about $80 million in extra tariffs. So it's a balanced outlook, but you can tell they're still very, very confident. So when you boil it all down, here's the real takeaway. nVent has brilliantly maneuvered itself to be right at the epicenter of two of the biggest, longest-lasting trends out there, electrification and AI. And as our world just keeps demanding more power and more data, you really have to wonder, for a company that's this perfectly positioned, just how high can they climb?